Okay, welcome everyone to the North Leeds Jitz podcast. Today we're really excited to be joined by Professor Pedro Coelho. I hope I'm saying that right.
And, that's good.
Thank you. I'm going to have a much harder time pronouncing the Gracie Barra school you're from. Is it Cascais, is it?
Cascais.
Cascais, which is just outside Lisbon in Portugal, right?
Yeah, it's just outside Lisbon. And it's between Cascais and Sintra. I don't know if you heard of Sintra.
I have heard of Sintra. I have a little bit of Portuguese descent in me. My surname's De Souza, so...
That's cool.
Yeah.
Sintra is like Cascais is like a beachy place.
Right.
And Sintra is like an historical place. It's a mountain with a castle and old palaces and everything. It has a lot of the history of Portugal. A lot of it happened in Sintra. So, very beautiful place.
Amazing. And if people have been following some of these podcasts, they'll know that we interviewed Professor Victor Estima, Professor Mike's instructor, who I believe is your head instructor, is it, Professor?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
Victor nowadays, Victor is my professor. It wasn't. I had a different teacher up until my first degree. I'm a black belt.
Right.
My teacher went another way, different from Gracie Barra. I stayed in Gracie Barra, and now I'm with Victor. Victor awarded me my second degree on my black belt.
Amazing. And we interviewed Victor, and Victor recommended that we speak to Professor Sebastian Gagne, and Professor Sebastian.
Another fantastic person.
Amazing guy. We had a great podcast, and I'm hoping to get out to Marseille this summer to meet him in person.
I should. He's a guy. He has great energy as a person, and great vision also. And he came up as a very good athlete. He is a black belt now, first degree black belt, I think. And but not only that, he came up inside the Gracie Barra organization, and today he's a very key person in Gracie Barra Europe.
Incredibly well respected, even as a blue belt who's been training 3 years. Even I've heard of Gracie Barra Marseille, and even I worked briefly at Gracie Barra Bondi in Sydney, and even you'd hear about some people talk about Gracie Barra Marseille even over there in Australia.
Yeah.
And
his work there is amazing, and in a short period of time, he has built an amazing academy, atmosphere, families, competitors, everything. So a very special school.
Yeah, and of course, he recommended us to speak to you. So that reflects highly on you, Professor. So thank you very much for your time today.
And thank you, Sebastian, for that reference.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to be here, and I'm always open to. I love Gracie Barra. It's a major part of my life for many years now. I've been in Gracie Barra since 2004.
Wow.
I've trained Jiu-Jitsu. I began training Jiu-Jitsu in 2003, not with Gracie Barra, because in 2003, Gracie Barra wasn't the team it is today. It was only in 2007 that Gracie Barra went to the United States. So here in Portugal, things were, everybody trained with everybody, So teams were a little, the team concept was a little different. And I began training as a white belt in another team in 2003. And then in 2004, I had my first contact with Gracie Barra, which was the first Gracie Barra in Portugal, which is Gracie Barra Passo d'Arcos, which is near Cascais.
Right.
The oldest Gracie Barra school here in Portugal.
Wow. And you're from Portugal yourself, Professor?
Yeah, I'm from Portugal. I was born in Lisbon. I grew up in Lisbon. all my life, and I only came here to. Now I live in Sintra, and I only came here to Sintra in 2005. 2005. I'm 43 now, and I've been here ever since. But I'm from Lisbon, but now my roots are clearly here. So I have my academy in Cascais, between Cascais and Sintra, and this is where I live, where I've built my family and everything.
And tell me, growing up in Lisbon, were your family, your parents into martial arts?
Yeah,
did you get into a young
my
age?
my parents still live in Lisbon. They live in Lisbon. I was born there. I lived in the neighborhood near the airport. Have you ever been in Lisbon? Do you know Lisbon?
I haven't. I've been only down to Portugal once, to the Algarve, but I'd love to go.
So you have to come, and you have to come to the Europeans, which is an amazing tournament. It's the center of the Jiu-Jitsu world in January. But Lisbon is an amazing town. I studied in Lisbon all my life, went to college, everything. I did sports in Lisbon all my life, several sports, martial arts also, judo when I was younger, much younger. And then I started, Jiu-Jitsu came to Portugal in 2000, 21 years ago, okay? The first, more or less, the first Portuguese teachers started, Brazilian teachers started to come to Portugal to teach Jiu-Jitsu. And I found out about Jiu-Jitsu years before that with some Royce Gracie tapes in the UFC, like most of the guys of my generation. VHS tapes of the UFC 1 and 2, and then, but there was no Jiu-Jitsu in Portugal. This was about, I don't know, late 90s, and then in 2000 the first Brazilian teachers came, and things start to develop slowly in Portugal. In 2003, when I looked again, there was already a federation. And that was my first experience with Jiu-Jitsu.
Amazing. And you grew up, did you have brothers and sisters, or was it just yourself?
I have one brother and two sisters. We were four. My brother and I, we've done sports all our lives since a young age. My sisters, not so much.
Right. Are you and your brother, does your brother train Jiu-Jitsu as well? Or?
No. He went with other sports. He was a professional basketball player for many years. Yeah, in the Portuguese league. He was Portuguese national champion and everything. But he retired at about 30 years old. But he's a great guy. So he was a professional swimmer also, competition swimmer when he was quite younger. So he went to triathlon at 31, 32. He's 50 now. He does triathlon for he's a coach, triathlon coach now. He's done Ironman twice, half Ironmans. He does triathlons all the time and coaches athletes. So he's a great athlete himself, but basketball ruined completely his knees. And for him to do Jiu-Jitsu, he wasn't able to start in a young age. I've invited him to train a couple of times, and his body hardly can take the pressure. He's a very big guy. He's almost 1.98 meters.
Okay, wow, yeah.
100 kilos. So he's a guy that has bad knees, and for him it's really hard to do an art like Jiu-Jitsu. But it's not only that. There are a lot of people with problems that do Jiu-Jitsu, but he's a competitive guy. He can't do something a half measure. He has to go all in. He wants to do competition and everything. So I think maybe Jiu-Jitsu wasn't for him, but it's cool. He's a guy who's completely into sports, and so am I.
Excellent. Was you being the younger brother, did you want to find your own kind of path through martial arts and not follow into like basketball or anything like that?
No, listen, I did a lot of sports coming up. I did judo. I always loved martial arts, and I always had a passion for fighting, much more than my brother.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember when I was younger, watching the Pride Fighting Championships back in the day, and that was something that my brother wasn't as much interested as I was, and I had a time between, like, I was 8 years old and 18 years old. I did a lot of sports, some of them competitively, tennis, badminton, and others. But I still, there was something missing because I had that experience when I was younger with judo, and fighting was something that appealed to me. And so later on, when I found out about jiu-jitsu, I was amazed, and I wanted to try it out. I wanted to find someone who could teach me jiu-jitsu, and I did. And the time where I found someone that I could train with was in the early 2000s.
And what was it about jiu-jitsu that kind of resonated with you more than, say, judo?
Judo, I always loved judo, but for me, judo was how can I put this? What resonated for me when I had my first 2, 3, 4 sessions of jiu-jitsu, what resonated with me was the ability to have a real fight with someone without getting hurt and going hard at the same time. That was something that impressed me. Something that I felt, okay, this is an art where I can get actual skills because we're fighting, but I won't get hurt every training session. In judo, I always had the impression if you did hard sparring, injuries were a bigger possibility than in jiu-jitsu. And there was always that feeling towards judo that there was something missing. Okay, you did sparring, you threw a training partner, but there wasn't the fluidity of the fight of jiu-jitsu where you go a whole 6 minutes or 10 minutes without stopping.
Right.
And that was the thing that appealed to me. Although I'm a big fan of judo, and I took up judo again 5 years ago. I'm a brown belt.
Oh, amazing!
And I practice judo once a week, usually regular classic judo. And we have one judo class here with a judo master here in Gracie Barra Cascais at Saturday. So, but only because I think it's an accessory you can't do without in jiu-jitsu.
Interesting.
And if you're a professor, and if you want to be a professor, a jiu-jitsu instructor, you cannot be a good jiu-jitsu instructor with a strong knowledge of grip fighting and judo. You cannot be a good instructor. You'll be an incomplete instructor. And that was one of the major reasons where I took judo again, took up judo again, to perfect my technique and also to be a better teacher. So that's what I'm aiming towards. And the last 4 years have been amazing because I've been able to add value to my students and increase knowledge in one aspect of fighting, which is very important to jiu-jitsu.
For sure, you know, I'm a big fan of the stand-up game, and I think that it has such depth to it, and it's so fascinating. And you hear people like John Danaher, who's also said similar things to what you have. Like, there is a bit of a hole, it seems, in the jiu-jitsu community in regards to the stand-up game. Like, we're amazing on the floor, but that bit before we get to the floor could use some work.
Tinan, for me, as a professor, for me, it's embarrassing for a black belt, a jiu-jitsu black belt, especially one that teaches. I'm not talking about competition athletes, because competition athletes can have a lot of areas where they're not good, because in other areas they're amazing. But for a teacher, not a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and there are a lot of people that reach black belt level in jiu-jitsu, but in terms of takedowns, they're white belts. And that's something that shocks me. And I'll give you my example, Tiernan. And one thing for me that makes me uncomfortable is, for instance, if I have a judo black belt or brown belt that sign up to my school to jiu-jitsu, and I have several, now I have even more, because I also have a connection with the judo community. So people know, okay, even jiu-jitsu, even judo competition athletes that want to learn the floor part of fighting, they know that I can connect both things, because I train judo also. So you understand the game. So they also come to me. But back in the day, I felt really self-conscious if I was in a class and I had, for instance, a brown belt in judo or a black belt in judo. That was my white belt. And I felt self-conscious teaching a technique, a standing technique. Even if it was a simple osotogari or something, I felt uncomfortable, because I knew my technique wasn't perfect. And I had a person there supposedly with perfect technique, and that made me self-conscious about it. So that when I started to go through that a lot and my academy grew, I decided, okay, I have to develop my game. And I had that whole background of judo when I was a kid, but even so that was what made me, okay, this is the part of the game that I had to master. There are a lot of things in jiu-jitsu that aren't exactly my specialty, but I know how to teach them, because you have to know every game possible so you can teach your students, because not all students are going to replicate your game. Okay, so you have to teach all the games. In terms of takedowns, that's a very judo is another whole art, and so that's the way I see things, and I would rather have more black belts in jiu-jitsu, put their egos aside, and try to develop that part of the game. Okay, that's what I would like to see.
It's great to hear. I heard Travis Stevens, the silver medalist, speak about how he was asked a question, essentially, if a jiu-jitsu athlete should go out and seek to find a judo instructor to help their takedown game. And his reply, I think maybe a little bit sarcastically, was no, you need to find a jiu-jitsu instructor that knows the takedown game as well and has learned that, because like you say, you need to be able to intermix both arts, and we should see more jiu-jitsu instructors dive into the takedown game as well, because it's a part of the art, right?
No, it's a very important part, and all possibilities are open. If we talk a lot about rule sets in competitions and all these organizations, takedowns have to be a major part of what jiu-jitsu is, because it's an important move. Even if you're talking about self-defense, many people talk about jiu-jitsu and self-defense, and the takedown part is essential in terms of self-defense, and that's something that I would like to see a little more of jiu-jitsu instructors to perfect their game, their standing game, and of course they have to do it with someone who knows about it. If it's someone with experience in jiu-jitsu, that's better, because that person can make the connection and teach you what are the most effective techniques that you can use from judo in a jiu-jitsu fight. What are the techniques you should avoid? And in those techniques you should avoid, if you want to do them because you're good at them, how should you do them not to get in a bad position afterwards? So these aspects are essential, and are essential not only if you're training a competitive athlete, but also if you're just breathing a black belt. Okay, so that's basically it.
It's amazing to hear, because it also takes a lot of humility, Professor, to be, a black belt as yourself, and then say, you know what, there's a hole in my game, and I'm going to go back, put on I don't know if you put on a white or blue belt for judo, and then say, I'm going to learn this whole thing.
I didn't put a white belt because when I was a kid, I went up to green belt.
Right.
But I said to my master in judo, listen, I would like to start again as a white belt. And for some time, I wore a white belt. When he graduated me 2 years over, he would pass me over directly from white to blue.
Right.
So that's what happened. But listen, Janet, the thing is, it doesn't even. I don't know if it's humility or like everybody has an ego and everybody obviously is proud of their own skills and everything. But the thing is, even if when you get to black belt, listen, I'm a 2nd degree black belt. I'm going to get my 3rd degree next year. So it's 9 years of black belt next year. But if, for instance, I have a teacher that comes by, like, for instance, Sensei Henrique Machado from Gracie Barra Manaus. He's almost a coral belt. And when I'm with him, and he comes over almost every year, when I'm with a person like that, there are a lot of, a person that has been a black belt for 30 years, I feel like a white belt. I don't feel like a black belt because the amount of knowledge and experience is so much. So even if you're a black belt, a new black belt, or an 8-year black belt, or a 10-year, or 15-year, whatever, you're always learning. And you have holes. Nobody has a perfect game. So you're referring to humility or lack of ego, but in my point of view, it's my desire to learn. I always have a desire to learn new things. If I'm not learning, something is wrong. So it's more that makes me go forward and search for knowledge from professors, and also that question about judo. And in regards to putting on a white belt, when I'm talking about judo, we're talking about a completely different art in terms of rule set, which changes a lot of things. So you should begin as a beginner. There's nothing to it. It doesn't make me a worse black belt in jiu-jitsu to do that,
Amazing mentality, Professor. Thanks for sharing that. Just speaking of being a white belt, you mentioned when you first started jiu-jitsu earlier. For so many people I speak to, they've had a moment that they realize, sometimes on the first session, sometimes later on, where it's they have the humbling moment, or the moment where someone that's smaller than them kind of beats them up a little bit on the mat, and it's shocking almost. Did you have you had a moment like that when you first started jiu-jitsu?
I had many moments. Listen, Ternan, up to this day, I have moments in jiu-jitsu that humble me. Okay, but back to when I was a beginner. I was talking to you about my evolution. I started in another team, and then my first experience with Gracie Barra was at Gracie Barra Pastarks. But when I really felt at home and started my jiu-jitsu journey, still as a white belt, was in Gracie Barra Lisbon, that opened up around 2005, and that's where I got my black belt. My black belt eventually in 2013. And back in the days in Gracie Barra Lisbon, we weren't a lot of people training. So we had a group of 14, 15 guys, which were white belts like me, okay? But then we had 3 or 4 guys some of them came from Brazil and everything. There were purple belts and brown belts at the time, and he used to train a lot with those guys. And so to see the difference between every training session, we would go at it. All the white belts would go at it, and it's a slaughter between them. Sometimes you end up on top, sometimes you end up on bottom, sometimes submitted gets submitted. But with the other guys, the difference was very big. Most of them already competed and everything. And every day there was one guy that came up with me. His name is Andre Peters. He now teaches in Abu Dhabi. When I start wanting to do guards, was later on my white belt journey, maybe almost a blue belt. And Andre Peters was a guy that always rolled with me every session. He was like two belts, always 2 belts above me. And he was a very strong guy. And my success in a class was how many seconds can my guard last with this guy?
Yeah.
And in the beginning it was 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds. And I always measure my success for that. But sometimes I'll get a minute without me getting my guard passed. But next class, 10 seconds, guard pass. You go back to 0. So those guys, I have that all my life, you know. Moments where you get humbled. And I have some really humbling moments that almost made me quit jiu-jitsu. Like we were in Lisbon and we would get a lot of visits from abroad. Okay, guys from abroad that were in Lisbon. And sometimes I remember this one guy, I was a blue belt, and we got a visit from a Brazilian that was a blue belt also. And a very strong guy. And my teacher at the time had that guy to roll with me in 1 or 2 sessions. And in one of the first sessions, he submitted me like in 8 times in 5 minutes. And after that class, I wanted to quit jiu-jitsu. I told my teacher, I don't deserve my blue belt because this guy is a blue belt. He's just submitting. I had no idea how it worked. I just got my blue belt. The other guy probably was more experienced than me, or had my knowledge about how jiu-jitsu worked wasn't something I could use to calm myself down and everything. So that was one of the moments, and my teacher said, "Pedro, forget about it. That's normal. That happens. There are bad days. There are good days. There are days where classes go and you had fantastic roles. There are days where classes go and you have roles that you roll with everyone and nothing comes out of it." And still to this day, I'm a black belt and I feel that way. There are sessions in the mat with my students that I feel, okay, my jiu-jitsu today is flowing. And there are other days where I end up class, I only use strength, explosion, not good at all. So even to this day, I feel like that.
Yeah, Professor, I'd be really interested to hear, is there anything you know now as almost living 9 years being a black belt that you wish you had known when you had just received your black belt?
A lot of things. A lot of things, obviously, because listen, when I'm walking to a decade as a black belt, which is almost as much time as I spent on the colored belts. And when you're probably telling, if you get there, and I'm sure you'll get there, when you receive your black belt, if you're a conscious person, you will feel that you'll be really happy and emotional to get it, but you will feel, okay, am I up to it? Okay, am I up for it? Am I really a black belt? So it's impossible not to feel when you go to bed that day do I really deserve this? Have I gotten to the level that black belts are? And the question is, if today I look back and I know I had no reason to feel like that, because receiving a black belt is not something magical. Okay, I was a brown belt, and then I received my black belt, and then I magically became another person. That's not how it works. It's something you build on for years. And when your teacher gives you your black belt, he's saying, okay, now you're ready to go on this stage and keep on building. And that's what sometimes people don't understand. Even if you receive your black belt and you feel, okay, I don't deserve this, you are going into a stage where every day of your life, you're getting more prepared. So that's why we say it's the beginning of the journey and all that blah, blah, blah. That seems every black belt talks about it, but it's actually true. It's actually true. So I don't know if I'm explaining myself or making sense.
It is, yeah.
That's the one thing I would say to myself. Don't worry about it. And then you feel unsure of yourself, and then for that reason, you feel you have to prove yourself. Okay, now if people roll with me, I have to show that I'm a black belt. Now if someone that doesn't know me comes to train with me, I have to prove my worth. And that's just our ego and mind and insecurities speaking, because I don't. Apart from the fact that only a few years after you being, for some, it can be a few years, for others, it can be quick. You understand that technically there are, inside the black belts, there are various levels of black belts, you know? Like inside a black belt competition, inside a black belt competition, you see a lot of different levels, skill levels. And as a professor, you see a lot of skill levels within black belt. So this belt is not something that transforms the person. It makes you evolve, it makes you try harder, and it makes you be a better person every day. But it's not something that per se gives you a certain skill, okay?
Right. Professor, do you have any particular advice that you give to your new students or your new white belts?
The main advice is this. You guys are gonna have moments here where you get really motivated with a passion and will to go on. But you guys are gonna have moments here that are gonna be really bad. That will make you feel bad and that will make you want to quit. In those moments, you guys gotta be strong. Gotta be strong, gotta talk to your professor, gotta talk to your training partner, because those moments are going to happen. And for us black belts, the things that hurt us the most, especially the teachers, is to see people giving up jiu-jitsu. Sometimes for valid reasons, because your life changes, but most of the times because they just quit. Okay? And they quit because they didn't reach that point where jiu-jitsu becomes, you can't go without jiu-jitsu. You understand, Tiernan?
Yeah.
And some people get to that point early, some people get to that point late. And for us, that's what hurts us the most. That's it. That's the advice I usually, on anniversaries, graduation days, talk a lot about, which is your body, your mind is going to always be telling you to not to do or to resist to difficult things. And jiu-jitsu is difficult. That's it.
Professor, I've heard many varied answers to this next question, so feel free to go in depth to it as much as you like, or not at all. But just what is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to you?
In terms of the art itself, technically?
Doesn't have to be technical. I've heard people talk in terms of the philosophy.
Okay. So I would rather talk in terms of the philosophy without being too boring.
No, not at all.
Listen, one thing that now for me, the jiu-jitsu mat is like life. And the jiu-jitsu mat is perfect in terms of it's perfect if you compare it to life. In life, people can have masks, personas, can hide their inabilities, their emotions. In the jiu-jitsu mat, you cannot do that. One thing that amazes me is that translates the power that jiu-jitsu has is there are some students of mine that have been with me, let's say 6, 7 years, 7, 8 years training. There are some that are my friends, so I spend time with them outside of the academy. But there are some that have been with me for 6, 7, 8 years. They aren't my friends in terms of I don't spend time with them outside the academy. And I know things about their lives, but not in-depth things about their lives. But I know them emotionally like almost anybody. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
And this is the beautiful part of jiu-jitsu. You get to know a human being in his most inner self, in his fears, his true way of being when he's confronted with pressure, with fear, with all these emotions. And you get to know a person on a level that you don't get to know people that you know years outside of jiu-jitsu, but for some reason you really don't know them like you know in a jiu-jitsu mat. So this is a place where everything which is inside you comes out. If it's bad, it will come out, and if it's good, it will also come out. And that's really powerful, Tiernan. And that's one of the reasons that some people get scared about jiu-jitsu because they get exposed, and that scares them because they feel that on the jiu-jitsu mat they can't hide their inequalities, their inabilities, or their emotions, and they're used to it. And so what do they do? What many people do when they face reality, they run. And so for me, jiu-jitsu is the perfect translation of life. If you're a person that is willing to sacrifice, that will come out on the jiu-jitsu mat. If you're a person who has the ability to go over obstacles, that will come out. If you don't have that ability, if you give up when you have one obstacle, that will come out also. So I would define Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as a perfect X-ray of a human being. It's impossible to spend 10 years with a person on the mats and not to know that person inside and out. It's impossible. You will know him inside and out. And that's something that, for me, is really powerful. And it's beside all the technical aspects of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it's amazing. We try and relay that to our members who obviously haven't joined us in lockdown, haven't actually experienced being on the mat with someone yet. And it's a hard thing to explain, but you've done it beautifully there, Professor. Professor Pedro, Professor Mike, who hasn't been able to be here today, he has a very robust, defined philosophy on teaching. I just wanted to know if you have a philosophy on teaching and being a teacher that's well developed.
Your terms, now we're talking a little more about teaching actual jiu-jitsu skills.
Yeah, teaching and being like you're a mentor as well as to these people.
I think so, Tianan. I believe in outside the mats, and if you come to my academy, people know me for being really strict in terms of martial code. Okay, so I believe a lot in discipline, in order. Maybe it's for instance, we were talking about judo 20 minutes ago, and judo, in terms of actual martial values, is much more developed than jiu-jitsu. That's something that I like. I like to bring that order, organization, discipline into the mats. Some people deal well with that. Some people like that. Some people don't, because some people don't do well in too strict environments. Okay, I like that because that's where I feel I can get the most out of people. In terms of my philosophy of teaching is simple. The main goal for me is to influence and change people's lives for the better through jiu-jitsu. And for me, building or growing a black belt from white to black, or a youngster through all the ranks and then to black belt, is about turning a person into a black belt in all senses of life. So I'm proud. I only have 2 black belts so far that were people that I graduated from white to black, because I've been teaching since 2010. This year, probably I'm going to graduate 4 or 5 more black belts, because I have a really big generation of brown belts and purple belts that have been with me for years, and it's getting to their time. And for me, I always say that I'm not only building black belts on the mat. I'm fortunate to see that those people are also black belts outside the mat, in the way they conduct themselves, the way they see their lives, the values that they share. And I'm very much about that. I feel I'm not only here to build good athletes, but also help people transform their lives. That's what I believe in. In terms of building a black belt, technically wise, I'm a person that firmly believes that jiu-jitsu fundamentals and then build from there. I'm extremely proud to see that my students, the ones that are on the higher belts, even if they compete or do not compete, are very technically sound. And that means not being able to be an animal on the mats or submit everyone. No, being technically sound, which means they can do a variety of things in jiu-jitsu: pass guards, do guards, takedowns. They can do several types of guards. They can do several types of passes, have several types of aims. And then on top of that, the instructors that I choose to work here with me at the academy, they're able to do all of that and also teach it. So that's my philosophy in terms of teaching, on the value side and on the technical side.
That's very interesting. You mentioned about the martial kind of philosophy there. What does it mean to be a martial artist? Not everyone that does martial arts considers themselves a martial artist. Many fighters, feel like they're more competitors than martial artists. And
for me, being a martial artist, I would define it like this. A martial artist is is a person who between two paths, if you have a path, you can go right or you can go left. Left will be the right path, but it will be the harder path, okay? And you will choose the harder path because it's the right path. That's a martial artist. And if you live your life believing in this, make yourself choose paths that are hard, but are the right paths and everything, then you're living your life by a conduct. And if you add that 1,000 times in a lifetime, for me, that's a life worth living. So that's what I try to explain to the younger guys and the kids, because kids, youngsters, teenagers always have the tendency to choose whichever way is easier, because it's easier, but it may be not the correct way, but it's the easy way. And the martial arts way, it's not that way. You have to choose the path that's right, but sometimes the path is hard. And human beings have a tendency to avoid what's hard and what gets them out of their comfort zone. So in my day-to-day, I'll give you a practical example of this. Now we have Zoom classes, and basically the class is 50 minutes. It's a physical class. We do condition drills and everything. And every Sunday I talk to my instructors, and according to the curriculum, the Gracie Barker curriculum, what exercises are we going to do? Okay. And some of them tell me last week was very hard, because we had on the physical side, we had squats, we had repetitions, we had a tabate exercise. Our legs were exploding. And one thing that I like to do is to, okay, we did that, it's hard, let's do it harder. Let's do it harder. And that's what I do, what I say to myself. And Tiernan, if you have that mentality of always going for the harder path, if it's the right path, always, you'll always be bettering yourself. And that's a way of living, bettering yourself. That's a martial way of living.
Yeah, it's a beautiful philosophy, Professor, and the road less traveled, isn't it?
Exactly it.
You know, Professor Victor.
That's a great book, The Road Less Traveled.
Before, appreciate we're running close to the end here, and I wanted to speak to you a little bit about Gracie Barra as a team, as a family. Professor Victor spoke of it as a movement. I believe Professor Sebastian talked a lot about the family aspect of Gracie Barra and the community aspect. What is Gracie Barra for you? What keeps you in the team?
That's a good question, Karen. I've been with Gracie Barra. If you count the first time I trained at Gracie Barra, it's 17 years now. And I've seen Gracie Barra completely transform. Gracie Barra 15 years ago had nothing to do. It was a jiu-jitsu competition team, basically. Okay, it was after Master Carlos was a person with an incredible vision, even back then, and he knew what he wanted to do. And when Gracie Barra went to the United States in 2007, that was really the beginning of the movement that Victor talks about. But for me, I would say this: I wouldn't teach jiu-jitsu if it wasn't the Gracie Barra way. I don't know if that tells you everything. I would obviously be practicing jiu-jitsu, okay? Be an athlete or doing jiu-jitsu for fun. but I wouldn't be teaching jiu-jitsu if it wasn't the Gracie Barra way. When I started teaching in 2010, I opened Gracie Barra Cascais. I saw jiu-jitsu one way. It was after a trip I did to California on 2011, where I stayed for about 3 weeks at the Gracie Barra HQ in Irvine training. Back then with Otávio Souza was the head instructor. And at that time, that was the time where I saw what teaching jiu-jitsu was all about and the meaning it could have in the way that people saw jiu-jitsu, the growth of jiu-jitsu. And when I got back to Portugal, I completely transformed my academy. In 2012, I opened the space where I'm in today. And I understood that, okay, this is the way I want to present jiu-jitsu to people. This is the way I want to teach jiu-jitsu, the Gracie Barra way. And from then till now, things have only gotten better, okay? So Gracie Barra for me is 10 years ahead in the game in terms of organization of any team in jiu-jitsu, 10 years ahead. So that's, for me, that defines Gracie Barra.
Excellent, Professor. You know, it's tough again. It's one of those things without our members having actually been in the academy, they don't maybe understand exactly what Gracie Barra is yet. But I'm excited for them to learn, having trained around the world with Gracie Barra myself.
Our own passion talking about Gracie Barra might seem strange for many of the students, which are white belts. But the only message I can leave to them is they'll understand.
Yeah,
they'll understand eventually.
Speaking of the global community, Professor, and it coming to near the end of the time where we should end this, is there anyone in the Gracie Barra community, local or worldwide, that you think has a great story to share that you'd like to point us towards?
Yeah, you've interviewed two amazing people, Victor and Professor Sebastian. There are two other people that I think you guys should consider talking to, if you don't mind giving two names.
That's quite
because I want to give you options also for now and for the future. One of them, they're really important for jiu-jitsu in Europe, and particularly Gracie Barra in Europe. One of them really key for Gracie Barra here in Portugal also. So one of them is Professor Lúcio Lagarto, okay,
yep.
From Gracie Barra Fulham. Maybe Professor Victor can arrange a talk between you guys. And the other one is one of the first teachers that brought jiu-jitsu to Europe. Is a Gracie Barra legend also. His name is Professor Carlos Lemos, also known as Escorrega. Okay, is its nickname. Professor Carlos Lemos today is in the United States, and he can be he's a world champion in jiu-jitsu. Very interesting guy. There's one other guy in the UK, which is Professor Carlos Lemos' student and friend, which is Professor Salvo from Gracie Barra Bath. Okay. Super interesting guy also.
Yeah.
So I leave these three names out there.
I'll reach out to them, and hopefully with your recommendation, Professor, we'll get them on the show and hear all about them.
If you have a problem, just call me. I'll send them a message. Okay, Tiernan?
Excellent. Thank you, Professor. Professor, lastly, I think it'd be really interesting from someone who's been in jiu-jitsu for as long as yourself. As a new school, what advice would you have for us and our members?
Guys, main advice for a new school is this. You guys started your school in a community of people, and your goal should be to really become a tool inside that community. so that the sooner the better that community looks at you as an important tool for the education of their kids and also transformation of their adults. That sense of having strong roots in a community is very important to a school. And that will lead you guys to all sorts of events, initiatives, and everything, because that's very important. The way your community sees your school and sees your instructors. It takes some time to build that reputation. Once it's built, you guys are set.
Thank you, Professor. I'd love to do one of these again. I think I've only scratched the surface of speaking to you. I had many more questions. I'd love to maybe even come out and visit Gracie Barra Cascais.
Shannon, if you come to Portugal, please do. You guys have my contacts, and just call me, send me a WhatsApp message, and you guys can drop by anytime. We have training every day, apart from Sunday. Nights, lunch hour, nights and mornings. So you guys are always welcome. I have a lot of friends who come from the UK to train here. So you will always be welcome. And next time I'm in the UK, I'll be sure to visit also. I would love to be in your school.
That would be amazing. Hopefully I can maybe get out to visit you guys in summer while I'm out if I go to Professor Sebastian. And any of your students, if they are ever in the north of England, they will be welcome like family.
For sure. Always do that. Okay.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much for your time, Professor. Best of luck tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And follow Gracie Barra Cascais. I already follow your school. Very nice facilities, and good luck with everything. Okay.
Thank you, Professor. I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, you too.
Take care. Bye.